Hello everyone, I am Dr. Rufus Vasanth. I am currently working as a senior consultant and orthopedic surgeon at Rela Institute and Medical Center, Krompet. I am basically specialized in joint replacement, trauma, arthroscopy and sports medicine. I did my MBBS from Madras Medical College and then went on to do orthopedic specialty, and then also did multiple fellowship trainings in India and outside India like China, Singapore, Spain and Australia. Today I am going to discuss about a very common problem, that is shoulder orthopedic problems. If you look at shoulder, the common problems which patients face are: one is pain, the second one is stiffness, and third one is weakness. I would like to cover some important topics and various factors which can be the reason for these problems. The first one which I am going to discuss is frozen shoulder. So the frozen shoulder, in otherwise it is also called as adhesive capsulitis or periarthritis. So what is frozen shoulder? Basically the shoulder becomes frozen. It has got less movement. So what can be the reason for it? If you look at the exact pathology, the shoulder joint is made up of many bones. So the arm is called as the humerus. The upper part of the arm is called as the head of the humerus, which is usually like a ball shaped part, and this usually articulates with the cup. The cup is called as the glenoid, which is attached to the scapula, that is the shoulder blade. In addition, you also have the collarbone, that is the clavicle, and one more bone called as acromion. So if you look at the shoulder joint, it comprises of mainly important structure called as capsule. When the capsule becomes tight, it is called as frozen shoulder. So what are the various reasons for frozen shoulder? If you look at frozen shoulder, it is very common in women more than men, and usually in the age group 40 to 50. There are various pathologies which have been proposed to cause frozen shoulder. One is diabetes, that is, if the patient has got uncontrolled sugars, especially if your sugar levels are increasing and decreasing over a period of time, this can cause frozen shoulder. The other various pathologies are hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism, any cardiac or heart related problems are the various causes for frozen shoulder. It can also be because of a trauma, that is post traumatic. After trauma, if the shoulder has been immobilized for a long time like a POP, or post surgery, you can have a frozen shoulder. Now looking at the frozen shoulder, what are the patient's complaint? Basically the patient goes through three phases: freezing phase, frozen phase and thawing phase. The freezing phase usually lasts for 6 weeks to 9 months. So in this phase, the main complaint is pain. The patient slowly has an increase in pain, and at the end of the painful phase, the patient also starts establishing stiffness. The second phase is frozen phase. It lasts around 4 to 6 months. In this phase, the pain actually settles down. The patient now feels much better, but the shoulder movements are restricted. The third phase is the thawing phase, which might even take up to 2 years. So in this phase, all the symptoms reside and the patient tries to be normal. So when the patient has got any of these symptoms, that is early stage where the patient has got pain, or later stages when the patient has got stiffness, definitely they have to meet a doctor. So as a doctor, when you come to me, what I will be doing? The first thing what I will be doing is that I will be looking at the patient clinically. I will first ask the symptoms of the patient and then examine the patient. In examination, the key thing for me is the loss of external rotation. That is, if the patient is not able to move the arm outward in a sitting position or in a standing position, it very classically denotes a loss of external rotation, which is a very classical diagnosis of frozen shoulder. So most of the times the diagnosis can be established clinically, but still as a doctor I would sometimes require to do an X-ray or a MRI scan, because X-ray can reveal a arthritic shoulder, that is degeneration of the shoulder, which itself can be a reason for frozen shoulder. The other thing is that when we do an MRI, there can be other pathologies like muscle tears, like the rotator cuff muscle tear, which I will be explaining later, can be a reason for the patient slowly developing shoulder stiffness and pain. So diagnosis, even though it is clinically established, sometimes X-ray and MRI might be needed. So once a diagnosis is established, what has to be done? In the early phases, the first thing is that you have to control the pathology. So if the patient is an uncontrolled diabetes or any other problem, as I already discussed, like hypo or hyperthyroidism, all these things has to be addressed and controlled to have a proper treatment protocol. The next thing, important thing, is that to restore the function of the shoulder. So the patient will require initially medications. The medications are mainly anti-inflammatory medications which reduce the pain of the shoulder and also help in doing physiotherapy, because in physiotherapy the aim is to establish the movement. So sometimes the patient might have severe pain when they are trying to do physiotherapy. So an anti-inflammatory medication is very important to reduce the pain and help the patient in do physiotherapy. So when you are looking at the physiotherapy, the main physiotherapy protocols are external rotation stretch, supination. The patient might be asked to have a forward flexion. The patient also can have a cross arm stretch. So, all these stretches basically slowly stretch the capsule and allow the patient to get back to the normal shoulder movements. So, these are very important. In addition, sometimes in a very painful pace, the patient might require a small dose of intra-articular injection, that is injection into the shoulder joint. Usually the commonly given injection is a steroid injection, and with current treatment modalities we can also give stem cell therapy injections. When the patient has crossed all these phases and the pain is still persistent, or the external rotation and other movement restriction is still persistent, and the patient is severely disabled, the only treatment option would be is to undergo a surgery. In the olden days or in the recent past, most of the times the surgery which was done was a manipulation under anesthesia, which is actually not a surgery. What is actually done is the patient will be given anesthesia, and under anesthesia the shoulder will be manipulated by the doctor. So, when you manipulate the shoulder, slowly the capsule is released, but the disadvantage of this procedure is that it can cause fractures and it can also cause muscle tears inside the shoulder joint because it is done without any supervision. Nowadays the key surgical procedure is arthroscopic pancapsular release, where with the help of a small keyhole surgery we can go inside, look at the joint and look all the tight capsular structures and slowly release it with the help of specialized instrument called as radio frequency ablator. So, once the capsule is released, the patient gets back the movement. So, with the help of physiotherapy or the surgical procedure, once the patient gets back the movement, it does not stop there. The key is to allow the patient to maintain the movement. For that we will be required to do physiotherapy for some time for the shoulder to get back to normal movement. And second thing is that to maintain that movement you also need to control the main pathology. For example, the patient was an uncontrolled diabetes, the diabetic status has to be under control, otherwise this problem can keep reoccurring. Now I am coming to the second important thing in the shoulder. So, what is that? Basically the shoulder has got important muscles, it is called as rotator cuff muscles. If you look at the rotator cuff muscles, it is basically 4 muscles: supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor and subscapularis. So, when a patient complains of muscle tear in the shoulder, one of these muscles is torn and usually it is the supraspinatus. So, if you look at the rotator cuff pathology, it can be 2 types. It can be a tendinitis or it can be a proper tear. First I would like to describe what is a tendinitis. If you look at any muscle or most of the muscles in the body, the muscles go and attach to the bone as a small tendon or a tight structure called as a tendon. So, this tendon can get inflamed or become swollen, this is called as tendinitis. So, rotator cuff tendinitis, the most common reason is impingement. So, what is impingement? If you look at the rotator cuff muscle, it is surrounded, or the roof is made up of acromion. So, acromion is basically a bone which sometimes can be curved, it can be a type 2 or a type 3 acromion, which is a curved or a hooked acromion which can impinge the shoulder muscles, especially the supraspinatus muscle. So, this can cause something called as impingement, and this can cause inflammation, and this is usually called as rotator cuff tendinitis. So, what are the symptoms that the patients have? If you look at the patient usually complains of pain. So, rotator cuff tendinitis, the patient complains classically of pain, and this pain can radiate from the shoulder up to the arm, and sometimes you can also feel the pain radiating to the back of your shoulder blade. So, this pain also can be a resting pain. For example, when the patient goes to sleep, the patient can get up in the middle of the night because of pain, that is called as night cries. The pain also sometimes can be felt all over the body, especially when you do overhead activities. So, the patient can experience sudden pain when the patient is trying to lift weights or trying to do any overhead activities while lifting weight. So, when the patients have these kind of symptoms, it is better to be diagnosed by a doctor. From a doctor's point of view, I would first like to examine the patient clinically and look at the various points of stress and tenderness where I can establish a diagnosis. There are various tests which are useful in diagnosing the impingement and rotator cuff tendinitis. Once a clinical diagnosis is established, the best way to establish a proper diagnosis is to do an MRI scan. Most of the times the X-ray might not be useful, especially the X-ray shoulder, which is the normal anteroposterior AP view, is not useful. You might require a special view called as an outlet view, which looks at the acromion spurs. The other important diagnostic tool is the MRI scan. In an MRI scan, we look at the various pathologies, including the impingement, where we can look at the acromion more clearly, and also look at the inflammation of the rotator cuff muscle, especially the supraspinatus at this insertion. So, once the diagnosis is established, the next most important thing is treatment. So, what are the treatment options? As usual, we always start with conservative trial. So, an anti-inflammatory medication as a symptomatic treatment to reduce the pain, physiotherapy to relieve the impingement, and then you might also require a short dose of intra-articular injection with the help of a steroid or a stem cell therapy. If nothing is working out, or the patient has got symptoms for more than 3 to 6 months, or the patient's pain is constantly increasing, or the patient is severely disabled, especially if the patient is involving the right or the dominant hand, then a small arthroscopic keyhole procedure might be required. So in the arthroscopic keyhole procedure, what we basically do is that we go inside the shoulder joint, we visualize all the pathologies, and if the acromion is curved, it can be shaved, and also the tendinitis part can be mildly shaved and also be given some intra-articular injections, which can be very useful. The other most important thing is rotator cuff tear. So this is more important than tendinitis, because now what happens that, as the word describes, tear, the muscle is completely torn. So when you look at the rotator cuff tear, it can be a acute tear or a chronic tear. If you look at an acute tear, it basically denotes as a immediate injury. For example, a patient fall on a outstretched hand, or the patient had a fall from a bike where the shoulder was injured, or the patient was trying to lift any heavy weights and had an injury, or any overhead activities causing injury. So all these things can be an acute tear. Usually an acute tear is very symptomatic and the patients come to the doctor immediately. The other one is something called as a degenerative tear. So degenerative tear usually occurs in older individuals. It happens over a period of time. As the patient becomes older, the shoulder joint can be reduced in size, so the acromion can impinge on the muscle and cause a tear. And as the older patients, there is a lack of blood supply to the muscles, and the muscles can also be on the weaker side, so the tear is more common. The other thing is that whether it is an acute tear or a chronic tear, the next important thing which a doctor would like to know is whether it is a partial tear or a complete tear. Sometimes the partial tears can be treated conservatively, but sometimes it might require a surgical intervention if the patient is symptomatically worse. So the other thing is the complete tear, which usually requires a surgical intervention. From a patient's point of view, what are the symptoms? When the rotator cuff muscle is torn, usually the supraspinatus is torn, the patient's main complaint is pain. The pain can be again like a rotator cuff tendinitis, where it can be radiating to your upper arm or to the back shoulder blade. And second most important thing is weakness. Usually when there is a tendinitis, the patient does not develop any weakness, but if there is a tear, the patient might develop weakness. So this rotator cuff weakness can be very classically established by the patient finding it difficult to raise the arm above the shoulder and various activities, so the patient feels that the arm is not functioning well. So these are the various symptoms the patients might face. So with these symptoms, when they come to a doctor, again the treatment modalities will be almost the same. The doctor will try to establish a diagnosis. In this case, the key diagnostic tool is MRI scan, because MRI is very important in diagnosing a rotator cuff tear, because depending on the tear, the treatment completely changes. So X-ray might not pick up anything, because the muscle is a pathology which can be seen only with the MRI and not in X-ray, because X-ray shows only the bones. So once a diagnosis is established, if it is a partial tear or if it is a early tear or a degenerative tear without any much symptoms, the doctor will try a conservative trial. The conservative trial again consists of anti-inflammatory medications, physiotherapy protocol for strengthening the muscles, and injections. The injections can be stem cell therapy injections or steroid injections. But if the patient is having symptoms, like if the patient has got an acute tear, or the patient is severely symptomatic, or the patient has got severe weakness, or the patient has got a large tear which is more than 3 cm, in such scenarios the best treatment option is to go for a small arthroscopic keyhole surgery, where the doctor will go inside and try to repair the tear. So this repair of the tear can be done with small suture materials and with small suture anchors, which will be put inside your bone, and with the help of the thread materials, the tear will be repaired. So next I am going to talk about an important structure inside the shoulder joint. It is called as a labrum. So a labral tear can have different symptoms. There are two important labral tears which I want you to know. One is a Bankart tear, that is an anterior inferior glenoid labral tear. Another one is a slap tear, superior labral tear anterior to posterior. So I will talk one by one. First I will talk about the anteroinferior glenoid labral tear, which is called as a Bankart tear. So what it is? From a patient's point of view, for easy understanding, this is something which causes the patient to have a shoulder dislocation. So sometimes the patient might have shoulder dislocation. Usually it is because of an injury. When you have a fall, or when you have an injury while playing, or any road traffic accidents, the shoulder might dislocate. Most of the times immediately when you go to the hospital, the doctor will try to push the shoulder back into the joint. But the shoulder will be reduced, but the labrum which is torn usually does not heal by itself. So the labrum is an important structure on the glenoid bone, that is on the shoulder blade. So this prevents the shoulder from dislocating outward. Usually it dislocates anteriorly, that is in the forward direction. So this labrum is a very important structure. So the Bankart lesion is nothing but anteroinferior, that is the front and lower part of the labrum is torn. So the head of the humerus, that is the shoulder joint, dislocates anteriorly. So what has to be done? From the patient's point of view, the main symptom is dislocation, or the patient can have recurrent shoulder instability, that is the shoulder can often come out of your joint. The patient can experience this even in sleep. So this is called as a sleep dislocation. So when a patient has got a shoulder dislocation, recurrent shoulder dislocation, the most important thing is that the patient should take this seriously. Most of the patients, what they do is that they start avoiding certain activities which can cause shoulder dislocation. So over a period of time, the shoulder becomes weak and the shoulder also loses its contour, and it's not good for you. So if a shoulder is dislocating often, the other disadvantage is that every time it comes out, it scrapes a part of the bone, and the bone also goes into for a loss. So the shoulder dislocation is something which you have to take it very seriously. So when you go to a doctor again would try to establish the clinical diagnosis. Most of the time the clinical diagnosis in the shoulder dislocation is very easy because the patient gives a clear history. So the key in diagnostic tool is a MRI scan. In MRI scan, the doctor also does a CT screening. So what is the main thing in the MRI scan is that the extent of the labral tear and whether there is any bone loss. So usually a shoulder dislocation and a recurrent shoulder instability doesn't have any conservative trial. There is no role for physiotherapy, exercises or injections, because this is a mechanical problem and the labrum has to be repaired. So this again requires a arthroscopic keyhole surgery, where the labrum can be repaired with suture materials and suture anchors, and once the labrum is repaired, you can get back to all normal activities over a period of time after following a proper physiotherapy protocol. This sometimes can be combined with another procedure called as remplissage, where the ankle will be put on the head of the humerus to prevent external rotation and further dislocation. If the bone loss is very severe and the shoulder is dislocated n number of times, for example, the patient might be having dislocation for almost 5 to 6 years and finally would have come to doctor. In such situations, it might not be able to repair the labrum because the labrum would have been completely worn out and the bone loss might be more than 20% on the glenoid. In such situations, you might require a different procedure called as Latage, where a bone will be attached at the place where the bone loss is present. The next important thing which I would like to discuss is the slap tear. This is also a labrum tear, but it is not in the front and lower portion, it is in the superior, that is in the upper position. It is called a slap, SLAP, superior labral tear anterior to posterior. Slap tear, usually the patients have different kind of symptoms. They hardly have any dislocations. The main complaint is pain, and the pain is usually very severe, and the patient especially feels pain while lifting any objects or doing any overhead activities. Especially if you look at the throwing athletes, they have a late cocking phase where they have a severe pain. So this has to be addressed. So again, when you come to a doctor with a slap tear, the doctor usually examines the shoulder, and the key in diagnosing the slap tear is again an MRI scan. In an MRI scan, the slap tear can be clearly visualized. The disadvantage of a slap tear is that most of the times it is attached with the long head of biceps. That is, your biceps in the arm has got a long head which attaches into a shoulder joint, and this usually is attached to the superior part of the labrum. So this can be torn along with the superior labral tear. So this again requires an arthroscopic keyhole procedure. Usually the conservative trials do not work much. So the role of physiotherapy, intraarticular injection and tablets might not help. The best would be to do an arthroscopic keyhole procedure, where we again go and repair the labrum. The other important thing in the shoulder is the bones. If you look at the roof of the shoulder, it is formed by two important bones, acromion and the clavicle. So the acromioclavicular joint is very important joint, and this AC joint sometimes can be dislocated. So this is called as a AC joint dislocation, and there are various factors described into it. So the clinical diagnosis, again the patient might have a very prominent shoulder joint where the acromion can be felt superiorly, and in addition the doctor also uses an X-ray and an MRI scan to look at various ligaments torn. So this AC joint dislocation, if it is minimally displaced and the patient is asymptomatic, usually it is treated conservatively. But if the AC joint dislocation is quite severe and the patient has got symptoms, or the patient wants to be corrected cosmetically, then it might require a surgical procedure. With the advancements in surgical procedures, currently we have arthroscopic keyhole procedures, where again this AC joint can be reduced and fixed with specialized buttons, and this can be also done as a small open procedure, and both the procedures are equally effective, and the patients usually have good symptomatic relief. The other important thing which I want to discuss in the shoulder joint is that you might have the collarbone fracture, which is very common. The clavicle fracture has been there for a very long time. In olden days, most of the times it was not surgically treated. The patients usually do well because the collarbone usually unites by itself, but the disadvantage is that sometimes the collarbone might not unite, or sometimes it can malunite in a shorter direction. So in such situations, the shoulder strength comes down. So when a patient has got a clavicle fracture, we normally look at which part of the clavicle is fractured. Commonly in the middle part, sometimes in the outer part. Outer part of the clavicle fracture usually requires a surgery because that is a very sensitive area and does not do well with conservative management. But when involving the middle part, we have to look at how bad the fracture is, and depending on that, the surgical treatment can be planned. I would like to end the shoulder problem topic by giving a small intro about the neck pain and neck pathology. There is something called a cervical spondylosis. Most of the patients come to me and say that, doctor, I have a cervical spondylosis. But what is spondylosis? Spondylosis or spondylitis is nothing but aging of your spine. It per se does not have any big significance, because if any of us take an X-ray, the X-ray might show, or the X-ray might be giving a diagnosis as cervical spondylosis or spondylitis. So nothing major to panic about. But I would like to discuss this topic because sometimes neck pain can radiate to the shoulder and the patients might be completely focusing on the shoulder. From a doctor's point of view, whenever I examine a shoulder, I also like to look at the neck. So cervical spondylosis is degeneration of the cervical spine, that is your neck bones. So this sometimes can have adverse effects, or it can have some nerve involvements. So when the patient has got a small disc bulge, whichever side the disc bulges, for example, if the disc bulges to the left side, the patient might have a radiculopathy or a radiating pain to the left side of the shoulder and arm. Sometimes it might go only up to the elbow, or sometimes it go up to the tip of the fingers. So this pain should be differentiated from the shoulder pain, because this is completely a different pathology, and most of the times even doctors miss it because the patient will be mainly coming with the shoulder pain. So if you focus fully on the shoulder, you might actually miss the neck pathology, which can be the reason for the shoulder pain. So the cervical spondylosis, the main complaint is pain. Classically, when the patient comes, if the doctor examines properly, we can make out that the patient has got a restricted neck movements most of the times, and this movements can be restricted in the terminal movements, that is the end of the movements the patient can have a mild pain which restricts their movements. The other thing is that the doctor would obviously like to do an X-ray. The first diagnostic tool would be an X-ray, where the X-ray the doctor looks at various degenerative parts, the bones, the quality of the bones, and whether the bones have slipped or any other pathology, or the space between the bones, how it is. The next thing is MRI scan. Nowadays MRI scan is very common. Most of the patients come to me directly doing an MRI scan by themselves. This MRI scan usually shows the various pathologies. So especially the disc bulges, nerve compressions are better visualized with the help of a MRI scan. So what I am trying to say is that sometimes your shoulder pain can be actually coming from your neck, which has to be properly addressed. So just applying massage or going for a local physiotherapy treatment by yourself, or taking painkillers by yourself, might not be useful, or in fact might cause major effects over a period of time. So always better to diagnose yourself and treat yourself in a proper way. In conclusion, if you look at today's topic, what all I have discussed is I have completely focused on shoulder joint. So shoulder joint pain, stiffness, weakness, restricted movement, all these things are the ones which I have focused today. The first thing which I discussed is a frozen shoulder. So basically the shoulder joint is restricted in all movements, especially the external rotation, but the patient's main complaint initially starts as a pain and later becomes stiffness, and there are proper treatment modalities to treat it. The second thing which I discussed is the rotator cuff muscle tendinitis or tear. So rotator cuff is the main muscle which forms the shoulder joint. So this can be sometimes torn or can be inflamed. So again, this has to be properly diagnosed and treated as I explained before. The other thing which I discussed is the glenoid labrum. The labrum is the important structure which helps the shoulder to stay inside the shoulder joint. So this labrum tear can be a anteroinferior tear, or it can be in the superior part, that is a slap tear. So all these tears has to be properly addressed and need to be treated in a proper way. The other important thing which I discussed today was the bone involvement. So the common problems in the shoulder joint are the clavicle, the collarbone fractures, and also the acromion, which can be dislocated, and the acromial spurs, which can cause impingement. So all these things properly diagnosed and treated usually helps the patient to come out of the problems in a very easy manner. The only problem is that most of the times the patients do not treat themselves in the correct time. They try to go for all basic treatment modalities like massages, ice packs and hot packs, and finally come to a doctor at a late stage. So that can be avoided, and usually early treatment gives the best results for the patient. The only problem is that the patient in the initial phases, they try to treat themselves with hot packs, ice packs, massages, but this can be very late, because most of the times when the patient come to the doctor, they come to a late phase. From a doctor's point of view, the earlier you come, the treatment options are better, and you also recover in a much better way. Hope this topic was very useful for everyone. In future, I would like to come again with some useful topics. Thank you.